Welcome to Tuna Whistles. I'm your host, Joe Chap, Detroit Lions. The Detroit Lions came out with their 53-man roster, and I had a couple quick thoughts. Number one, they're carrying two quarterbacks. Hendon Hooker is going to a no football injury list. That wasn't a surprise. Emmanuel Mosley coming back, not put on the pup list, was definitely a surprise. I know Emmanuel Mosley. I don't think he's going to play in week one, but I think it's probable to say maybe week two, maybe week three, because they definitely think he's going to come back before week four. So that is a good sign. What I was really shocked by, and if you've been following my YouTube, you've been saying I've been saying I think there's a trade coming. I think there's a trade coming. I think there's a trade coming, or there could be roster moves that come. But what I was looking at was they have two running backs on the roster right now. So they're going to add to that running back room. Craig Reynolds was released. Benny Snell was released or waived. Look, they made moves. And there's obviously a reason why they only kept two running backs for now. You know that they're not going to go into Kansas City with two running backs. That's just not going to happen. But if you look at the way that Detroit has structured this 53-man roster, they have a levy of depth at the edge position with James Houston, with Romeo Okwara, with Julian Okwara. We've heard that Julian Okwara is mentioned in trades. We heard about potentially James Houston being involved in a trade per Pro Football Focus. Kyle Meinke alluded to it too. It led me to believe with the two running backs on the roster that there's going to be some moves made in the next couple of days that are going to change the roster um, that we're not privy to. Like we don't know what's going to happen. And my line of thinking towards this whole there's got to be an ulterior move is well, obviously you got two running backs on the roster, but obviously you have Jameson Williams being suspended for 6 games. So your wide receiver depth is a little bit chintzy right now. If you remember back to Dan Campbell's comments in after the Jacksonville Jaguars games or before the Jacksonville Jaguar game, he was talking about how they need 1 to 2 wide receivers to step up. They only kept one of those wide receivers. That was Antoine Green. And now Antoine Green is a fantastic player. I think he's got some speed to burn. I think he could help this team absolutely with his speed. But he said 1 to 2. And I think there is a move coming with the wide receiver position. I truly do believe they're going to make a move for a wide receiver, whether it's a trade, whether it's a free agent that's available right now, whether it's one of the players that has been cut from the other teams in the NFL. I look at this 53-man roster as in pencil right now. I don't look at it as a concrete. And if you have followed the NFL in any totality, you know that when they get the 53-man roster, that it could drastically change before the end of the weekend. You know, we got Labor Day weekend coming up, and then the Lions start their season a little bit earlier than the rest of the teams. They start Thursday, so they're going to be in pregame. They're going to be in game mode Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday because they got the game Thursday. So I would expect a couple moves in the next couple days, next couple hours, next 24 to 48 hours. I would expect some moves from Brett Holmes. And along my line of thinking, could he use James Houston in a potential trade for a wide receiver? You know, because like, look, no matter how you think about Jameson Williams, he's going to be coming off that 6 game suspension. It's kind of an impossible task to say, yeah, he's going to get off from the jump street and be a legit wide receiver. You're going to have to give him some time, maybe 2 to 3 games. I would give him to get back in the motion to get up the game speed because everyone's going to have a 6 week head start on him. Do they bring in a wide receiver? Or do they bring in a different position? I just think that with this depth at edge that they have, with the two running backs on the roster, I think it's given them a lot of flexibility to make ulterior moves. You know, we're in a different category with the Detroit Lions this year. They're able to make moves because they have a pretty damn good team. Now, we heard they were in on a kicker. Could it be a kicker? That could be up for debate. There's a lot of moves that Brad Holmes could do, but there's like a couple positions that would really make sense. So when you look at, James Houston, you look at Julian Okwara. I'm not saying James Houston's going to get traded. I think that Kyle Meinke alluded to it in M Live. I think that there was a Pro Football Focus that mentioned him in a trade proposal. I don't think James Houston's going to be available, but Brad Holmes kicked the tires on Trey Lance. Okay, he inquired about Trey Lance. It's obvious that Brad Holmes is inquiring on players across the league, doing his due diligence. And if a deal did come along where James Houston was involved or Julian Okwara was involved and it made the team better, does he pull the trigger? Now, we all think that James Houston is a great player for the Detroit Lions. I think he's a guy that you really can't trade. I love his pass rush ability. But if it made the team better by getting a different type of player, would you do it? This is what Brett Holmes has to juggle. This is a general manager juggle of, do you make this trade and how much are you losing on the back end? Now, if they trade Julian Okwara, what does it mean? Well, they could replace Julian Okwara because, as Dan Campbell has alluded to a couple of times, Julian Okwara is a little bit inconsistent. So do they move him for a wide receiver? Anything's on the table right now. Because I look at this 53-man roster, it's not concrete. It's put in pencil, and it's going to be erased pretty soon. I think that they have made decisions that they can look at, but I think that they have players on the roster that have trade value, and I think that that's what they were protecting. I think this is a weird portion for Detroit Lions fans because they have never been in the position where they actually have pieces that they could use in a trade. I think this is a different time. I think Brad Holmes recognizes that this team is ready to win. And I think that with the way that you protected some players, I absolutely wholeheartedly believe that there's a trade coming for the Detroit Lions. Who would you trade for? I'm interested to hear what people have in the comments because maybe tomorrow when I post this at 6 a.m. in the morning, there's already a trade put through. But with him kicking the tires on Trey Lance, doing his due diligence, you know that he's calling general managers and kicking the tires on each player. If there's a chance where he can make this team a lot better, I think he'll do it in a heartbeat. Now, here's a hypothetical trade that you could look at, and maybe you're like, ooh, that would be pretty decent. What if he traded James Houston and Julian Okwara to the Indianapolis Colts for Michael Pittman? Would you do it? I don't know if I would do it for Michael Pittman. I think that's too much to give up. But it serves a need because J-Mo is going to be out the first 6 games. And when you come back, you got J-Mo, you got Khalif Raymond, you got Michael Pittman, you got guys that can burn, and you got guys that can go up and make the catch. This is a unique position that the Detroit Lions are in because a lot of teams don't have the luxury to make decisions and have depth at the certain positions that you have depth at that a lot of teams are looking for. A lot of teams are looking for an edge player. A lot of teams are looking for a 6th-string corner. There's Ifeatu Melifonwu who has potential. Maybe there's a team that likes Ifeatu Melifonwu. These are things that can happen down the line, and it's interesting to see what could happen and what Brad Holmes could bring home because he has protected some players that I think that could be used in a trade. I think that when you look at the 2 running backs, that's a telltale sign that this roster is drastically going to change over the next 48 hours. And it's interesting to figure out what it could be. But in my opinion, I've been alluding to this for the last week and a half. I think there is going to be a trade happening with the Detroit Lions. And I think Brad Holmes is going to make his mark. If you're new to the channel, please subscribe. We will have Detroit Lions news content throughout the week. We're going to have our Detroit Lions preview Thursday. So stay tuned to that. And we will see you in the next video. Have a good one, guys.